The royal scandal that doesn't add up. William, Camilla, Charlotte, and the story behind the story. A royal scandal can become convincing long before it becomes true. Give it a castle, a family grievance, a child in the line of succession, a furious future king, and a punishment described with just enough ceremonial language, and the story begins to feel as if it must have come from somewhere inside the palace. That is exactly why one recent narrative deserves a closer look. It claims that Prince William acted within hours after an alleged confrontation involving Princess Charlotte, stripped an honorary royal role from a young relative identified as Queen Camilla's granddaughter, and forced a wider reckoning over who will belong in the monarchy of the future. The version is detailed, emotional, and built like an insider documentary. It even supplies private exchanges, internal paperwork, and a chain of responsibility running through the royal household. But before asking whether William was too harsh, whether Camilla was defending her family, or whether the episode revealed a hidden transfer of power, there is a more basic question. Does the foundation of the story match the public record? That question matters because the British monarchy creates an unusual environment for rumour. The institution is public, but much of family life is private. Its ceremonies are visible, but the internal reasons behind many choices are not titles, style, patronage, household appointments, invitation, balcony appearances, state occasion, and family gatherings all carry different meanings. Yet online, they are often blended into one vague idea of royal status. A small factual error can therefore hide inside a larger story that sounds perfectly plausible. And this particular story contains more than a small error. The official royal family website says Queen Camilla has 5 grandchildren. Public reporting identifies them as Lola and Freddie Parker Bowles, and Eliza, Gus, and Louis Lopes. Lady Amelia Windsor is a real member of the extended royal family, but she is not Camilla's granddaughter. She is a granddaughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, a cousin of the late Queen Elizabeth II. That single distinction changes the entire architecture of the viral narrative. There is a second problem. The story repeatedly places Princess Charlotte in a confrontation between teenagers or young women. Charlotte was born on May 2, 2015. As of 2026, she is 11 years old. She is also third in line to the throne, behind her father, Prince William, and her older brother, Prince George. Those are not minor details. They are basic facts that any serious royal report should get right. So the real investigation begins here, not with a corridor at Windsor that the public has never been shown, not with an alleged order that has not been produced, not with a private conversation no named source has verified. It begins with the distance between what a dramatic royal story says and what the record can actually support. If you value royal stories that separate evidence from speculation while still exploring the power, history, and human stakes behind the headlines, subscribe to the channel, because the most interesting part of this case is not simply that some details fail a fact check, it is why the story was so easy to believe in the first place. The first reason is that the monarchy really does operate through layers of status that can look confusing from the outside. There is the sovereign, currently King Charles III. There is the direct line of succession. There are working members of the royal family who carry out public duties in support of the monarch. There are extended relatives who may appear at major family or ceremonial events without being working royals. There are also formal household appointments and ceremonial roles that can be recorded publicly. These categories overlap socially, but they are not interchangeable institutionally. The official royal family describes working members as supporting the monarch through thousands of engagements each year, while Parliament's Research Service separately recognizes working members as those who help support the sovereign in official duties. That distinction matters because the viral story depends on a role it calls a young royal companion, presented as a palace-created privilege that supposedly allowed one person to stand in selected photographs and appear beside working royals. The narrative then argues that William could revoke that role quickly because it was not a peerage, not a constitutional title, and not protected by law. Structurally, that explanation sounds sophisticated. It gives the audience exactly the kind of institutional detail that makes a fictional mechanism feel authentic. Yet, authenticity is not the same as verification. Real ceremonial household roles do exist. In May 2006. For example, the court circular officially recorded Queen Camilla's appointment of Ike Elliott as a page of honor. The court circular is the royal household's public record of official engagements and certain appointments. That is what verifiable ceremonial status looks like. A named role, a public record, a date, and an identifiable authority behind the appointment. Camilla's own family has also appeared in genuine royal ceremony. At the 2023 coronation, 3 of her grandsons served as pages of honor. Their presence was widely reported and was connected to one of the most important state ceremonies of the reign. But that participation did not transform them into working royals, give them a place in the constitutional line of authority, or create a permanent royal rank. It showed something more subtle. Private family can be given ceremonial visibility without becoming part of the permanent public machine of monarchy. That real-world distinction is probably one reason the invented or unverified role in the viral narrative sounds believable. It borrows the texture of genuine monarchy. It takes a real phenomenon, relatives appearing in ceremonial settings, and wraps it in a title that sounds official enough to escape casual scrutiny. The same technique appears in the story's treatment of William. Prince William is the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. He carries out public and official duties in support of the king, and his position gives him enormous symbolic importance. His 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, occupy the next 3 places after him in the succession. That alone means decisions about their public upbringing, exposure, and official presentation carry unusual weight. But being heir is not the same as already being sovereign. The British monarchy is a constitutional institution, and the legal powers associated with the crown are not simply a private collection of family privileges. Parliament describes the king's modern constitutional role as broadly ceremonial within a system in which legislation, ministers, and Parliament carry the decisive political authority. The House of Commons Library further explains that the crown has legal and constitutional meanings extending beyond the monarch as a private individual. This is where royal storytelling often becomes slippery. A future king can have immense influence without possessing every formal power audiences imagine. A Prince of Wales can shape his own household, decide how his children are presented, support charities, hold meetings, represent the sovereign, and prepare for a future reign. None of that means he can privately rewrite the line of succession, create constitutional offices at will, or erase another person's legal status because of a family dispute. The line of succession itself makes the point clearly. The House of Commons Library notes that removal from the succession can require legislation. History provides the dramatic example of the Duke of Windsor after the 1936 abdication. But the principle is larger than that episode. Constitutional status is not the same thing as an invitation, a household job, to a patronage, or a ceremonial appearance. So if a story says William stripped a royal title, the first question should be, what title? If it says he removed a palace roll, the next question is, what role? He recorded where? Created by whom? And under what authority? If the answer is a string of unnamed documents and private recollections, the audience has not been given proof. It has been given atmosphere. That difference becomes even more important when children are placed at the center of the narrative. Princess Charlotte's public significance is real. She is third in line to the throne, and her position reflects a major change in succession law. For those affected by the Succession to the Crown Act, 2013, younger brothers no longer automatically displace older sisters. Charlotte therefore represents, in a very visible way, the modernized principle of absolute primogeniture within the succession. But public significance does not make every story about her public property. The more dramatic the claim involving a child, the stronger the evidence should be. In the viral narrative, the audience is asked to accept not only that a confrontation occurred, but also the exact emotional condition of Charlotte afterward. The words allegedly exchanged, the interpretation William placed on those words, the response of Catherine, the reaction of Camilla, the contents of an internal review. the testimony of a staff member, and a later private reconciliation. No named source is provided for this chain. No official statement confirming the confrontation is identified. No public document is shown. The story repeatedly uses phrases such as documented account, written testimony, internal order, and private recorded conversation. But the existence of a phrase describing evidence is not evidence that the document itself exists. This is one of the oldest persuasive techniques in political and court storytelling. Specificity creates trust. A vague rumor sounds like gossip. A rumor with a time, a room, a signed paper, a witness, and a precise emotional reaction sounds researched. The human brain tends to reward detail because detail resembles memory. But invented detail and verified detail can look identical on a screen unless the audience is shown where the information came from. That is why attribution matters so much. Consider two sentences. The first says, Camilla privately complained that William was clearing the future court before he inherited it. The second says, a circulating story attributes that complaint to Camilla, but no public confirmation or named source has established that she said it. The emotional force is different. The first is cleaner, sharper, and more dramatic. The second is more responsible, yet the second is the only version that tells the audience what is actually known. The distinction is not an argument that private disagreements never occur inside royal families. Of course they can. This is a family that also functions as a national institution. Its members have different responsibilities, histories, marriages, children, staffs, public roles, and relationships with the press. Tension is not difficult to imagine, but imagination cannot close an evidentiary gap, and here the story becomes more interesting. Because the underlying conflict it invents or exaggerates is rooted in a real structural question. Where does family end and monarchy begin? Queen Camilla illustrates that question unusually well. She is queen because she is married to King Charles III, and she carries out a substantial public program in support of the monarchy. Her children from her first marriage, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, are her family, but they are not working royals. Her grandchildren are part of her private family world. Even when ceremonial moments bring them into the public frame, the royal family's official biography confirms that Camilla has 5 grandchildren and 5 step-grandchildren. While her public work centers on charitable and representational duties alongside the king, that creates a genuine emotional and institutional tension without requiring any invented palace fight. The British monarchy is full of relatives who are undeniably royal by blood but do not work for the institution. Lady Amelia Windsor herself is an excellent example. Her family connection is real. She belongs to the Kent branch of the wider royal family. She has appeared at royal occasions and has a place in the broader dynastic network. But she is not a senior working royal and is not Camilla's descendant. Public life around the monarchy contains many such gradations. Once those gradations are understood, the viral story's emotional logic becomes easier to decode. It constructs a young woman who supposedly occupies a fragile space near royal life, gives her an unofficial-sounding official role, then makes that role vulnerable to the future king. The drama depends on insecurity, close enough to privilege to fear losing it, but not secure enough to control it. The second reason the story feels plausible is the genuine transition taking place between reigns and generations. King Charles III became sovereign on September 8, 2022. After the death of Queen Elizabeth II, William became heir and now serves as Prince of Wales. That change did more than alter titles. Every accession reorganizes attention. The person who was once the future moves into the present, and the next generation moves one step closer to the center. For William, that means a dual identity that is inherently dramatic. He is a son supporting his father's reign and, at the same time, the man expected to succeed him. He cannot behave as though the throne is already his, yet he cannot prepare for the future as though his eventual role is irrelevant. That tension does not require secret warfare. It exists in the constitutional calendar. The royal household's own records show William carrying out investitures on behalf of the king and conducting meetings connected to the Duchy of Cornwall, the Royal Foundation, and other responsibilities. Those are public examples of delegated or inherited responsibility, not evidence of a private power struggle. Institutional transition is usually less cinematic than that. A monarchy prepares an heir because continuity is the point of hereditary monarchy. The heir assumes more experience over time. The sovereign retains the constitutional position until death, abdication, or another lawful change. Family affection, rivalry, frustration, and strategic differences may all exist around that process. But public evidence rarely allows outsiders to assign motive with certainty. The third reason the viral narrative works is that it uses one of royal history's most powerful themes, the fear that one branch of a family will replace another. British royal history is full of succession crises, rival branche, disputed inheritances, marriages made for dynastic security, and relatives whose status changed when political conditions changed. The modern monarchy is not the Wars of the Roses, and it would be absurd to pretend otherwise. Yet the cultural memory of dynastic competition remains deeply embedded in how audiences understand royal families. A headline suggesting that William intends to clear out Camilla's side therefore activates a much older story pattern, the incoming court replacing the old court. Historically, new reigns do bring changes. Households change, appointments change, patronages can move, priorities evolve. The public tone of a reign can differ sharply from that of a predecessor, but that is not the same as a purge. And there is no need to invent one to discuss how William might eventually shape his monarchy. The evidence that does exist points to a simpler truth. William is first in line, George is second, Charlotte is third, Louis is fourth. The future institutional core is therefore already defined by succession law, not by a secret family vote. Camilla's relatives are not competing with George, Charlotte, or Louis for the throne. They are not an alternative dynastic branch waiting to displace William's children. The entire premise of a zero-sum succession battle between the Wales children and Camilla's grandchildren confuses social proximity with constitutional position. That confusion is dramatically useful because it turns invitations and ceremonial access into weapons, but constitutionally, the two categories are not comparable. This brings us to the most revealing feature of the original narrative, the way it turns visibility, ceremony, and supposed private paperwork into evidence of power. In a monarchy, visibility really can matter, but a photograph, en invitation, or an unnamed internal document does not prove motive by itself. Could parts of the story be based on private information that has not been publicly documented? In theory, yes. Royal reporting has long depended at times on confidential sources, and not every legitimate source can be named. Private households do leak. Journalists sometimes verify information that the public cannot independently inspect, but anonymous sourcing is not a magic phrase that makes every claim credible. Serious reporting normally gives readers some basis for evaluating the source. Proximity to events. Corroboration. A publication with editorial accountability. Multiple independent confirmations. Documentary evidence. Or later on-record developments. The viral story under examination provides none of that in a way the audience can test. Instead, it narrates hidden scenes with the certainty of a novelist. That is the central weakness. The problem is not that the story is dramatic. The problem is that it asks to receive the trust of journalism while using the freedoms of fiction. And the deeper twist arrives when the false or unsupported details are removed. Because a real story still remains. It is the story of a monarchy trying to balance blood, service, public money, family loyalty, ceremonial visibility, and generational transition. The House of Commons Library has noted that there are a limited number of working members of the royal family supporting the sovereign. The royal household's 2025-26 reporting recorded thousands of engagements carried out by the King, Queen, Prince and Princess of Wales, and other working members. This is a functioning public operation, not simply a large family attending events together. That practical reality creates pressure around who performs duties and how the institution presents itself. Every working royal represents staff, scheduling, security, patronage, travel, public expectations, and institutional messaging. The royal household itself includes offices that coordinate official programs and advise on constitutional matters, so when commentators debate whether a future William reign might use a smaller or differently organized group of working royals, they are discussing a legitimate institutional question. What they cannot honestly do is pretend that an unverified fight has already revealed the answer. William's future monarchy will be shaped by decisions that have not yet been made, circumstances that cannot be known in advance, and the constitutional position he will occupy only when he becomes sovereign. The public can examine his record as Prince of Wales. It can observe the causes he emphasizes, the responsibilities he undertakes, the way he and Catherine manage public appearances with their children, and the people they place around their official work. Those are data points. They are not a transcript from the future. Camilla's position is similarly more complex than the viral story allows. She is both queen and a woman with a family that existed long before she occupied that title. Her grandchildren can be personally important to her without becoming constitutional actors. The 2023 coronation demonstrated that her family history could be incorporated symbolically into a state occasion. Her grandson's role as pages did not threaten the Wales children, and Prince George's own role in the ceremony existed alongside theirs. The moment showed coexistence, not competition. That is a far more revealing image than the invented idea of two family branches fighting over ceremonial territory. The monarchy survives by making room for several identities at once. Charles can be king and step-grandfather. Camilla can be queen and grandmother to non-royal grandchildren. William can be heir and father. Charlotte can be third in line and still be a child. Lady Amelia Windsor can belong to the extended royal family without being a working royal and without being Camilla's granddaughter. Confusion begins when those identities are flattened into a single ladder of power. The emotional appeal of the viral story comes from precisely that flattening. Everyone is placed on the same ladder, fighting over the next rung. William protects his children. Camilla protects her descendants. A young relative fears losing access. Charles is imagined as caught between wife and heir. The family becomes a court in which every personal injury is also a constitutional maneuver. That is excellent drama, but real constitutional monarchy is often more complicated and less theatrical. The king's legal and ceremonial functions operate within rules, convention, ministerial advice, and established institutions. The royal family's public work is organized through households and official offices. Family relationships exist alongside that system, sometimes intersecting with it, sometimes remaining private. The more carefully those layers are separated, the harder it becomes to sell every family rumor as a constitutional crisis. This is where the story's biggest supposed piece of evidence, silence, also deserves scrutiny. The original narrative repeatedly treats a person's refusal to answer, hesitation, or quiet response as proof of guilt or agreement. That technique is powerful because silence allows the narrator to supply the meaning. The character does not have to say, "Yes, William is right." The narrator tells the audience that silence means exactly that. In real analysis, silence is ambiguous. A palace may decline to comment because a story involves a child. It may refuse to engage with a false claim because answering every rumor would create an impossible precedent. Lawyers may advise against comment. Staff may consider a subject private. A family member may simply choose not to discuss another relative publicly. None of those possibilities proves innocence or guilt. Silence becomes evidence only when there is independent context strong enough to support a specific inference. Without that context, it is an empty container. The same discipline should apply to motive. There is no public evidence establishing that Camilla fears William will erase her family from royal life. There is no public evidence establishing that William views Camilla's grandchildren as a threat. There is no public evidence establishing that Charlotte has been used as a bargaining piece in a dispute between the two households. Those ideas can be explored as hypothetical tensions in a fictional royal drama. They should not be narrated as facts about living people. The story becomes stronger, not weaker, when that boundary is respected, because the real question is no longer, who won the confrontation? It is, what does the popularity of this confrontation tell us about the monarchy people expect to exist? The answer is uncomfortable. Many viewers have come to expect the royal family to function like a prestige television dynasty. Every balcony position is strategy. Every expression is coded hostility. Every absence is banishment. Every title is a weapon. And every family disagreement is a rehearsal for the next reign. Royal history certainly provides enough conflict to make that expectation understandable, but modern evidence rarely supports such constant certainty. Power has not disappeared from the modern monarchy. But sensational stories often place it in the wrong location. The decisive issue is whether a claim can be tied to a real office, a real record, a named source, or corroborated reporting. When the load-bearing facts fail, atmosphere cannot carry the story. That conclusion may sound less explosive than the original headline, but it leads to a much larger lesson about royal media. The monarchy is unusually vulnerable to stories built from partial truth because so much of its visual world is real. The castles are real. The titles are real. The line of succession is real. The family connections are real. The household offices are real. The ceremonies are real. The history of conflict is real. The future transition from Charles to William, whenever it comes, is real. A fabricated or unsupported narrative does not have to invent a universe. It only has to insert a false event into a universe the audience already recognizes. That is why royal misinformation can feel more persuasive than an obviously fictional story. It borrows legitimacy from the institution itself. The responsible response is not to drain all drama from royal history. It is to move the drama toward questions the evidence can actually sustain. There is real tension in the fact that William must prepare for a role he does not yet hold. There is real tension in the fact that Charles is both sovereign and father to his heir. There is real complexity in Camilla's position as queen, with a non-royal family of her own. There is real public interest in how George, Charlotte, and Louis will eventually navigate lives defined by succession and scrutiny. There is real institutional pressure in maintaining a working monarchy with a limited group of people carrying thousands of public engagements. And there is real historical significance in the way the monarchy adapts without surrendering the appearance of continuity. None of those subjects needs a fabricated shove in a corridor. In fact, removing the invented confrontation allows a more mature question to emerge. How much freedom will William eventually have to shape the monarchy around his own priorities? The answer is both considerable and limited. As sovereign, a future King William would become the symbolic center of the institution and would have substantial influence over the organization and tone of the royal household. He could make choices about patronages, appointments, styles of public engagement, family participation in official life, and the priorities emphasized by the monarchy, but he would inherit a constitutional system, not a private company. The monarchy operates in relationship with parliament, government, law, established convention, public funding arrangements, the Church of England, the Commonwealth realms, and public expectations. The sovereign cannot simply convert personal preference into unlimited constitutional power. That difference between influence and absolute control may be the most important concept for American audiences trying to understand the modern crown. The British monarch is not an executive president with an electoral mandate, nor is the monarch an absolute ruler. The institution depends heavily on symbolism, continuity, neutrality, and the careful performance of duties within constitutional limits. For the heir, preparation, therefore, requires discipline. William's challenge is not merely to accumulate authority, it is to learn when authority should be visible and when it should disappear behind institution. That is why sensational stories about him taking control can be misleading, even when they are flattering. A future king who appears to be fighting personal family battles through royal machinery would create exactly the kind of problem constitutional monarchy tries to avoid: the impression that public institution and private grievance are indistinguishable. The same standard should apply to Camilla. A queen who used ceremonial access purely to promote her private descendants would invite legitimate scrutiny, but occasional family participation in ceremony is not by itself evidence of institutional capture. The 2023 coronation openly included Camilla's grandsons in a specific ceremonial function. Just as Prince George had a role connected to the king, the event was public, documented, and bounded. That is the crucial word, bounded. Healthy institutions survive by drawing boundaries without pretending families have no feelings. A royal relative can be loved without being a working royal. A child can be in the succession without being treated as a full-time public figure. A queen can honor her family without changing constitutional hierarchy. An heir can protect his household without possessing the crown before accession. And an audience can enjoy royal drama without being asked to mistake invention for evidence. Seen this way, the most emotionally powerful theme from the viral narrative can actually be preserved. Adults should not allow institutional or family resentment to be inherited by children. We do not need to claim that a specific confrontation happened to recognize the broader truth. Royal children grow up inside stories written about them before they are old enough to answer. Their positions are assigned by birth. Their photographs are interpreted internationally. Their family relationships can become symbols of political ideas they did not create. For George, Charlotte, and Louis, the challenge will be to develop private identities under public expectations. For Camilla's grandchildren, the challenge is different. They are connected to the Queen, but are not in the same constitutional position as William's children. Public fascination may pull them toward royal narratives, even when their actual lives sit outside official royal duty. That asymmetry is real. It does not need to become rivalry. And perhaps that is where responsible royal storytelling can offer something better than scandal. Perspective. A palace is not only a setting for secrets. It is also an office. A title is not only a status symbol. It can have a legal history. A family photograph is not only an emotional tableau. It can reflect protocol, logistics, hierarchy, or simply circumstance. A future king is not only a protagonist in a succession drama, he is an heir inside a constitutional system. A queen is not only the spouse of a monarch, she is also a person whose private family does not automatically become public royalty. And a child in the line of succession is not a character available for any storyline a creator can imagine. Once those principles are applied, the claim at the center of this video becomes much easier to assess. There is no public confirmation establishing that Princess Charlotte was involved in the alleged Windsor confrontation described by the viral narrative. The woman identified in that narrative as Camilla's granddaughter, Lady Amelia, is misidentified according to the public family record. The ceremonial role described in the story is not established by the public sources that document actual royal appointments. The claimed internal order, recorded accounts, aid testimony, and private family conversations are not presented with verifiable sourcing, and the language of stripping a royal title overstates even the story's own explanation of what the alleged role supposedly was. Once the unsupported scandal falls away, William, Camilla, Charles, and the younger generation remain connected by a genuine question that will shape the monarchy for years. How does a hereditary institution change hands without turning every family relationship into a contest for power? For Charles, the present task is to reign. For William, it is to support the sovereign while preparing for a future no one can schedule. For Camilla, it is to occupy a public role at the center of the crown while maintaining a private family whose members do not share her constitutional position. For George, Charlotte, and Louis, it is simply to grow up under circumstances in which ordinary family moments can be transformed into international narratives. The public does not need to choose a villain among them to understand the pressure, and that may be the clearest answer to the question we began with. Did Prince William really strip a royal role from Queen Camilla's granddaughter after a confrontation with Princess Charlotte? On the evidence available publicly, that story should not be presented as established fact. Core details conflict with the record, and the most dramatic claims are unsupported by verifiable sourcing. But the reason the story traveled is real. It touches a deep uncertainty surrounding every monarchy in transition. Who will matter when the next reign comes? Who will remain close to the center? And how will personal family bonds coexist with an institution built on hierarchy? Those questions are powerful enough without pretending we already know the answers. So here is the question worth debating. When royal creators face a story that is emotionally compelling but poorly supported, should they publish it clearly labeled as dramatized speculation, or abandon the dramatic version entirely and focus only on what can be verified? Leave your answer in the comments. If you value royal history and modern palace stories that distinguish evidence from rumor, like the video, share it with another royal watcher, and subscribe for the next investigation into the history behind the headlines.